So next we have Mr. Mike Clark from US Cybercom and Ron Fodor from HII, and they'll take it away from here. And thank you, Jared.
There you go. No, I think it starts with you. Yeah, sounds
All
good.
right, great. Well, thanks, Val, for the introduction. We can probably start with more introductions, just that's the format that I've been seeing since we've been here.
Sure.
So do you want to go first?
Okay, I appreciate it. Pleasure to be here. Always happy to come to Texas, particularly San Antonio, my favorite restaurant in the world, Rudy's Barbecue. So Mike Clark, this week in the command, I am the Director of Acquisition and Technology, the J9. I have been in the command since 2007, actually a predecessor organization known as Joint Functional Component Command for Network Warfare. In my time there, I have been the Deputy J3 for operations. I have been the J1 for manpower and personnel. I've been the Director of contingency planning in the J5, and so this week I'm the J9. In my role as the J9, I'm responsible for acquiring the technology and services to support the command and our warfighting teams. I've been in the government since I enlisted in the Air Force in 1977. So I retired from active duty in 2001 and became a federal civilian, and I've been in the command since then.
Great, thanks. So a similar background, not quite as extensive, but I was also in the Air Force. I was born just a little bit before you enlisted. But I also joined the Air Force. I was ROTC in college, so I got my commission. And my first tour was at Keesler Air Force Base, then managed to head down to Howard Air Force Base in Panama. Part of our job down there was to actually close the base, take all the U.S. infrastructure out, and turn over the real estate to the Panamanian government as part of the Canal Treaty that Jimmy Carter signed back in the 70s. After I left Howard Air Force Base, I got to Fort Meade and decided that's where I wanted to be for the rest of my life, and that's exactly what I did. I separated from the Air Force as a young captain and joined the private industry community and been there ever since, supporting most of the agencies in and around the Fort Meade area, to include JFCCNW back in its infancy, and turning into U.S. Cyber Command ever since. Currently, I'm with HII. We're known as the U.S.'s largest shipbuilder. We produce aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, a lot of the Coast Guard cutters and surface vessels for the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard. But we also are a services-oriented industry, and we're getting bigger every day. We just purchased a large organization, Alliance Science and Technology, and we're growing substantially in the services side. So that's my role. I'm one of the operations managers within that services organization, known as Mission Technologies. And we support lots of customers, to include U.S. Cyber Command and the U.S. Air Force down here in San Antonio. So I think the point of the conversation was to talk about how we secure innovation, and that's the theme of the conference, as it was explained to us in our prep session. And we've got a lot of thoughts on that we'd like to share with this wonderful audience. So as we think about innovation and where it comes from and the disparate geography that we can benefit from and the different organizations and the different industries, frankly, how do we make sure that we're getting the best COTS tools, the best vendors, and we do that in a secure fashion? So thinking about the cybersecurity aspects of all the things that we're trying to pull in to mission-focused organizations like US Cyber Command, how do we go about doing that? And Mike, I know you've got quite a few thoughts on that. Do you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, sure. So within the ecosystem of Cyber Command and the J9, one of our major thrusts is this idea of innovation that we're looking at. Candace mentioned a few minutes ago Dreamport. You know, Dreamport is really our poster child for how the command is trying to drive innovation. It's a specially authorized congressional law called a PIA, or Partnership Intermediary Agreement, that allows us to avoid the traditional DoD acquisition processes. We establish a partnership arrangement with an organization called MISI, the Maryland Innovation and Security Institute. And the actual acquisition activities, if you want to call them that, are enabled by their ability to do non-traditional partnerships with small businesses. The focus of Dreamport really is on that small business and academic engagement, where through MISI and Dreamport, our organization, our forces, our teams, members, can go over to Dreamport and talk with the MISI experts there, Carl Gumto and Armando, and pitch ideas. We have this problem. And they reach out through their non-traditional channels to bring small companies into a collaborative environment with the teams where they find opportunities with new technologies. And then we can demonstrate those technologies and then quickly pivot to another, to be able to acquire the technology from the small business. You know, I'm proud to say that Cyber Command has a very successful rate of small business. About 40% of our contracting is done with small business companies, as the department defines small business companies. So Dreamport, through the engagements, through MISI, and the ability to do non-traditional acquisition activities, we have driven innovation into the command. Some of the ideas that we're looking at now. One of the big challenges that we see from a secure perspective is a lot of the organizations we work with have to invest in their own DevSecOps environments. So they have to build their own networks, their organizational networks, and they spend a lot of money building organizational networks to bring them to secure level. So one of the things that we recently started looking at, is there a possibility that Cyber Command could provision a secure DevSecOps environments to industry? And I'm not necessarily talking about classified, right? Because a lot of the vendors that we work with don't live within the ecosystem of classified. So this would be an enablement of us putting in an environment that is secure, not necessarily classified, that would allow those vendors to work iteratively, either, for example, through a CRADA relationship, or through a PIA relationship, or through an OTA, all those various acquisition-like activities to do that, to be able to rapidly develop technology. You know, finding the two bubbas or gals in a basement that have this brilliant idea, giving them the opportunity to work with the command to bring technology, that's the dream we have, right? Find the best minds and bring them into the command and enable that secure zero trust environments, right? Built around zero trust. You know, there's a lot of technology that is on the cusp of changing how we do business from a secure perspective in the cyberspace. Of course, we talk a lot about zero trust. If you're not familiar with that, basically your networks today, once you log in, basically any user has free reign to look at any data, navigate through the network, find your domain name server. Basically, it's predicated on this idea that once you're in the network, you're a trusted agent. Zero trust turns that upside down. The intent is nobody is trusted, no system is trusted, no data is trusted. So every individual, every system, every piece of data has to have identity management, and you're only authorized to access through an identity management construct the data or the systems that you are authorized to do. Some of that may be enabled by another technology, blockchain. So blockchain as an identity management capability, the sort of distributed service with continuous transparency and the ability to trace back changes in the environment is another technology. Of course, we talk a lot about machine learning and artificial intelligence. Frankly, today, most of that is buzzwords, and we're really still looking for the practical application of those from a cybersecurity perspective. But there's some really neat ideas that NVIDIA has and some other organizations that are on the forefront that we think are going to bring some really innovative. But I'd like to pivot for a second. We tend to think about innovation and security and innovation from a technology perspective. And even I just did that, right? I started talking about technology first. But there's really a much more fundamental aspect of the innovation part, and that's really about what Candace talked about, and that's the people part. And the basic idea that if you look at I have the opportunity to read almost all of the after-action reports from almost all the major intrusions that come in through intelligence, and almost every one of those is traced back to what? A human. A human that either did something or didn't do something that resulted in a vulnerability that a threat actor was able to take advantage of. So really where I think the future of the innovation is going to be, needs to be, is not just on the technology side. That's the exciting side. I'm a geek. I love technology. But I think the real advance is going to be is when we start changing our culture away from the idea that cybersecurity is just a hygiene activity. It's just, just hygiene. All I got to do is keep my network clean. And it starts to become a safety issue. Every element of our life today is dependent upon cyber. If you think about it, in the same way that we are dependent on air for air transportation, land, vehicles, sea, ships, we have a culture of safety that protects us from bad behavior within those domains. We haven't made that shift in cyberspace yet. And I think that's the key change that needs to happen. It's not just the technology, there's also the human element, the cultural element of the way that we propose or try to secure cybersecurity, the way that we're developing the innovation, secure innovation. It's really helping us look at new tactics, new techniques, new procedures, new ways of organizing, new ways of training, changing the culture. I really think in the next couple of years, that's where the innovation needs to be. Not just the technology, but the human element as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on pretty much everything you said. When we stood up a DevSecOps capability within HII, it was a culture shift, and that was probably the biggest mountain that we had to move, right? Is getting people to buy into this DevSecOps culture and environment. Yes, the tools and the capabilities and the software and the cloud architecture and the environment, those are all important too, but the biggest thing that we found that led to its success was that culture piece. So getting people to think differently and to do different things is really hard. And you mentioned zero trust, and if you were down in Augusta back in August, I gave a briefing down on the Innovation Showcase floor around how we push zero trust forward. And I know you're doing some things there, which is great, and I'd love to talk about that if we have time. But thinking about zero trust and the culture of zero trust, everybody thinks, or I think everybody agrees that it's a great idea, but there is more that we need to do to operationalize the zero trust architecture. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear what you're doing specifically with Dreamport and some of the activities you've got going on there.
Yeah. Actually, before zero trust became a thing, the Cyber Command, in partnership with Missy and Dreamport, began looking at, because we saw that as becoming the cusp. And so we built a lab environment there with the vendors that were marketing zero trust technology. and brought them into an environment that forced them to build an end-to-end capability. What we found is each one of the companies that were marketing Zero Trust had a part of the problem, whether it was the identity management, or it was the secure cloud, it was the ability to maintain security controls. Each company had a part of it. So we brought it into this environment, and we were able to knit together end-to-end capabilities through multiple vendors. One of the things I'm really proud of is the work that we're doing with the Air Force at Dreamport. The Air Force is the executive agent for what's known as the Mission Partner Environment. So the Department of Defense partners with foreign countries around the world. And in order to enable that, of course, we need a network to be able to communicate, share information at the pace of operations. So in the past, basically, we would create these cross-domain solutions between their sovereign networks and the DoD networks that generally created more vulnerabilities than they helped. So the Air Force came to us, was excited about the demonstration of the Zero Trust Lab that we have put together. And now that lab and the Mission Partner Environment Program Office is what's prototyping the capability for the Air Force to develop a Zero Trust environment at a scale of a theater-wide operation to support collaborative information sharing with foreign partners. Pretty exciting what's being done today. It's on the cusp of being deployed. There is a prototype version in CENTCOM today that's being used. Over the next year, it's going to be deployed to INDOPACOM. It's beginning to be developed and deployed out there, and as well as EUCOM over the next year as well. So it's going to become the standard. And I'm proud to say that was done by Cyber Command and Dreamport, the way we did it.
That's great. That's exactly what I was advocating for back in August is, industry has its role to play, right? We need to come up with ideas and solutions and provide technology and services to enable Zero Trust architectures to become a reality. However, the government has a major role to play too, and the things that Cyber Command is doing with Mission Partner Environment are proving just that. How do we prototype these capabilities so that we can achieve an approval to operate in an operational capacity, right? Zero Trust is still in its very, very early infancy from a maturity perspective, and a lot of things still need to be fleshed out as far as how we get that AO to agree to the risk associated with putting that system in an operational environment. Things like trust algorithms, things like policy administration. How do you ensure that those types of capabilities are not going to create additional risk for the end users, the folks in uniform that are putting their lives on the line? So that's really important, and I definitely wanted to talk about that a little bit.
And back to the cultural issue is, while the DoD and the Mission Partner Environment, we've made that cultural transition to the need to implement Zero Trust. And foundational to Zero Trust is all your data is stored in a cloud, right? A common cloud. So the next cultural hurdle that we're having is getting our foreign partners willing to put their data into a single cloud. And the understanding that the access management and the ability to do identity control to all of the data is secure, right? So our next hurdle is helping those foreign partners make that cultural leap over to trusting the idea behind a Zero Trust and that the enabled through a single cloud environment to do that. We're going to do that through a series of exercises. So for example, CENTCOM recently has held a couple of exercises now, and we have several foreign partners have bought into this idea of allowing their data to be shared in a single cloud environment, as well as the US, and then being able to control that data. And it's not just unclassified, it's also at the secret level. The system that's being built and deployed right now is called SABRE, which is secret and below, is the intent behind it. So it's a pretty major change in the way that we're going to do business.
Agreed. And thinking about the broader ecosystem of innovation, innovation comes from anywhere. We can't limit where innovation comes from, and if we do, we're probably going to miss out on a lot of things. To Colonel Frost's earlier discussion about 50% of the potential solutions out there are going to come from a certain base of the population. If we start to limit where we find innovation and where we pull innovation into our solutions, then we're really doing ourselves a disservice. So enabling an ecosystem like a zero trust type of ecosystem to bring innovation in from pretty much anywhere and make sure we do it securely, I think is the right approach to how we actually go about doing that.
And I'm have the intent of doing something similar with artificial intelligence and machine learning. Also pivoting on enabling through the Dreamport activity is, and also begin some of the ideas we're looking at also now is Dreamport today is a unclassified activity. And so over the next year is we're going to begin enabling the ability to do classified work up to the TSSCI level at Dreamport as well. You know, my vision is what I would really like to be able to do is bring real data, whether it's real data coming out of the DODN or it's real intelligence data or it's real and then bring that into an environment so that I can then, you know, imagine if I could bring in all of the security information that's collected on the DODN today into an environment where I've got multiple vendors' products, you know, whether it's NVIDIA or pick your company, that from an AI ML perspective, and they're there with us prototyping and doing the big data analytics and building the algorithms and the models that we need in a collaborative lab environment. That's the vision that we're going to over the next year, I think, is to be able to enable that environment that you're talking about.
Perfect. Well, I think we were scheduled to go till 9:40 or 9:45.
Okay. I'm happy to keep going.
Yeah, I think we should. I'm not getting any hooks.
They haven't given the hook yet.
Right.
You know, going back to the DevSecOps is the command is also trying to make that cultural change. So I talked about this last night. Our principal warfighting platform is known as the Joint Cyber Warfighting Architecture. I like to say it's actually the architecture of the warfighting platform. And we are trying to make that cultural shift to a DevSecOps-like production, acquisition, development. You know, the traditional way within the department is waterfall, right? I have a milestone A, I make a decision, I go to a milestone B, right? And 18 months, 24 years later, a contractor hands me something and you hope it works. So moving into a continuous improvement cycle through the DevSecOps where the operator, the user, is sitting there with the developer and there's continuous development that goes through the security process that then is deployed to an operational environment. That's a massive cultural change in the way that we do business. And probably the biggest cultural change is in our operations community, right? So in this new DevSecOps environment, the operator isn't just sitting around waiting for something to be delivered to them. They are integral to the process now. They have to be there because they're the ones that ultimately are the ones that are going to take the product and be able to do it. So changing everything in the way the command approaches this from how do we generate requirements? It's not just the old, if you know, JROC, JSIDs, right? I do a capstone requirements document, I hand it over to a vendor, and hopefully 4 or 5 years later, now as the continuous development of user agreements and capability needs statement on a DevSecOps level environment where you're doing production of capabilities on a 90-day production. And that requirements process is a fundamental change in how the command is going to do its business. Agile, another term, being more an agile organization. So we're still at the very nascent stage of doing that, but it is going to be future. You know, no longer is going to be traditional wall-based systems and drive that in terms of our big capabilities, the command and control capability, the underlying fabric of the unified platform where our big data analytics will be done, the persistent training environment where our operators will be brought into a real constructive virtual environment to do real-time training, virtuals, and then being able to demonstrate the ability to get into adversary space to do that. So that's pretty exciting work we're doing.
Indeed it is. The other aspect of all this ecosystem, if you will, that we haven't really touched on, and you know, with about 2 minutes left, maybe we could briefly discuss where we think we're going, is the idea of data, right? the systems, the architectures, the capabilities that we're all after, the underlying piece of all of that is the data behind it all. And so there's this idea within the JADC2 architecture of a data fabric that allows the connectivity between services, between organizations, between end users that traditionally were in very stovepipe types of architectures to access all that data. Mission Partner Environment's a great example of that. But what are other thoughts or activities or concepts and prototypes are you doing to enable that data fabric to be more inclusive of organizations and connectivities?
You know, some of you that were old enough to remember the Clinton's campaign, his campaign slogan that he kept them focused was, "It's all about the economy, stupid." I'm going to have a sign made to put over my desk that says, "It's all about the data, stupid." And it is probably, as I look at the biggest strategic challenge I have right now, and particularly within the JICWA that I was talking about, is exactly that. So today, within the unified platform that I discussed, we actually have 7 different big data platforms. All right, so there's each one of the military services have a big data platform. The command has its own big data platform. DISA has its own big data platform. And that's the struggle. And not only, it's also at 3 different, if not 4 different classification levels. So how do you create a unified data ocean such that that's transparent to the user? And how do you enable a single query from an analyst building an analytic that has the ability to look across all those big data platforms simultaneously? You know, the instinct is, I want to collapse it all into one. But I'm not sure that's the right way to do it either. So one of the things that UP is doing is exactly that, is with each one of the organizations that owns their big data platform is building in the data rights and the ability to query, a single query across all of those to do that. Are we there yet? Probably about 30% is where we are today. And mainly it gets back to the cultural challenge that we have. Each one of those data platforms, the big data platforms, has a separate security structure owned by an authorizing official within that service change who culturally says, I'm not letting anybody have access to this except who I authorized. So how do we change the culture that allows that transparency? And I think it's a larger DoD level problem. So the CDA office that was just stood up, you know, that data transparency issue is, we're but a microcosm of that in Cyber Command, that I think we're actually going to be at the forefront of helping the DoD and CDAO, because when we looked at JADC2, which is the new DoD level, similar to how I look at it from a JICWA perspective for cyberspace, now scale that to all domains of warfare. And you can see the challenge we're going to have. So,
for sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was a great commentary on the data piece of it. And again, I love the comment. It's all about the data, stupid. I'm gonna borrow that.
Okay, so, yeah.
Well, I think, Val, are we about out of time here? I know there's another speaker lined up, so I wanted to thank Mr. Clark here for all his thoughts and everything he's doing within the Dreamport and Cyber Command community to establish that innovation and really foster it. The culture aspect of it, I think, is really where we're going to make massive gains. And I appreciate all you're doing.
You're welcome. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
That was such a great conversation. I thought I would just let it go. Great. Thank you, Mike.